Hello and welcome to R&R Resilience and Relationships, Real Talk for Real Life. I'm Stephanie Olson and I'm here with
Rebecca Saunders.
Yes, yay. And we are going to be talking addictions today.
So keeping it super lighthearted.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. No, I think it's a very important topic. I had, and I'll talk about my personal addictions, which is plentiful. Um, but I had somebody say to me once, I've never been addicted to anything. And I actually knew for a fact that they had been. And it wasn't drugs, it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't something typical. And so in their mind, they didn't see it as an addiction.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a lot of people would fall into that category because I know that some of the big things that come to my mind, we talk addiction, I'm thinking drugs, alcohol, some types of substance, but it doesn't just have to be that.
It does not. And so, like, personally, and I've shared this many times, I'm an open book, but I am a recovering alcoholic. And although I always say addict too, primarily because I did drugs, alcohol was my drug of choice. And so that was where I really had my issues, but I was a daily drinker and a very functional alcoholic. And so I think a lot of people would have been surprised. People who knew me well were not at all surprised. But, I think that alcohol is one of those addictions that is, I think it's an epidemic, alcoholism. And I think we really don't realize how big it is because we've got, the mommy sip times or whatever they call them. There's just widely accepted. And we talk about alcohol, we all of the time, and how, oh yeah, I'm gonna be doing some daily drinking. During COVID, we heard about that all the time. And I think alcoholism absolutely skyrocketed during that point. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
I was just on a Facebook group like a day or two ago, one of these parenting groups, and people ask for advice, and honestly it's better for entertainment than anything else.
Yeah, right.
There was someone who had said, I'm getting so overwhelmed with my kids. I've started having, a couple drinks every night. It really helps. Am I doing something wrong? I'm starting to feel a little concerned. And it was kind of disheartening, the amount of comments like, no, you deserve that wine. You don't, whatever. There was one person who commented and was saying, if this is becoming a routine for you, that's hard to break, then that's addiction. This is a problem. And they were getting ripped apart in the comments. Don't make her feel bad. Don't judge her. And I think
asking for advice.
Yeah. Right. She's saying, is this a problem? Well, yes. If you have to have this to get through your day, it's a problem.
Yeah. So when I started drinking, I was very young, and I always drank differently than my friends. I thought.
What do you mean?
Well, I couldn't stop thinking about my next drunk. So the first time I got drunk, I was 16 and I blacked out that night. That was my very first drunk. And that's not normal. That's not typical drinking. And so I continued to drink like that. And whereas my friends were like, whatever, let's get together. Oh yeah, we can drink. I was like, okay, when's my next drunk? When am I going to drink again? It was just a different experience. And I always tell the story. My grandparents drank every night at 4:00 p.m. They had one Manhattan. And when I lived with them, I wanted that maraschino cherry in the Manhattan. I didn't want the ones in the fridge. I wanted the one in the Manhattan because it tasted so much better. So My philosophy is that I think there's two kinds of alcoholics.
Okay.
There's the kind that are predisposed to it through genetics, and you see that a lot in family lines. And I found out that my biological father, who I don't know, died of alcoholism. And so it was very embedded into both sides of my family, even though I didn't know the other side. But I also think there are those habitual drunks. I call them, I call myself a drunk. So I'm not trying to be offensive, but those habitual alcoholics, just like you're talking about, where I don't have a genetic predisposed predisposition I'm not predisposed genetically, but I am exhausted, I'm busy, and at 5 o'clock when I'm done working or being a mom or whatever, I have a drink. And now I have two, and I need to have that every night just to feel calm or whatever the case may be. And you become an alcoholic through habit. So that's kind of what I see, those two pieces.
I can definitely see that. And I would think that this would extend past just alcoholism too, because
Mhm.
I mean, we see the same kind of thing with other substances or even just behaviors, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, like a very different way to take this, but I mean, how many times are we checking our phone, right?
Yeah.
And can you leave the house without it? Can
Right.
you leave the room without it?
Right. And what happens when you do? And I think that's the key thing. And this is how I always defined alcoholism, in a sense, because people say, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a problem drinker or whatever. But if you are thinking about your next drink, that's probably a red flag. But more than that, if you don't know, you have a drink and you don't know if that's going to be one drink or 10 drinks. You just don't
That
know.
loses control.
That's a problem. And you can be a binge drinker for, a weekend and not have a drink for 3 months and then a binge drinker on the weekend. That doesn't make you any less of an alcoholic. And so I think we have this mindset of an alcoholic who sits under a bridge with a bag and no teeth.
Mhm.
But that's not necessarily the case. And I think to your point, what you're talking about, it's the same thing with the phone. I have a hard time leaving the house without my phone. And I would probably say, yes, I'm addicted to my phone. So, at what point do you determine, yeah, that's an addiction?
That's a good question. Because I would say that I'm probably addicted to my phone too. Get really anxious if I leave without it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I can't find it, I start to get sometimes angry of like, oh, where did I
Yes.
put that?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay, do you think that kind of your internal thoughts and behaviors are the way to measure addiction, or do you think that there's another way to measure that?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to measure that. One is if it's interfering with your life. And so certainly internal things. If you're questioning, then there is probably an addiction. I don't think, I have never questioned, am I addicted to brushing my teeth? I don't know. I'm making that up. But,
You do have,
something
yeah.
I do every day, something I do 3 times a day. And yet I don't, it's not like, oh my gosh, when am I going to do that again? I have to do that right now. And I'm sure there's people addicted to brushing their teeth. Who knows? But so I think you can look at that internally if it's causing you angst and it's you think, gosh, I think I have a problem. But also if other people are noticing it, hey, I think you're on your phone all the time, or you drink all the time, or you eat unhealthy food. I mean, whatever it may be, other people notice it and they're concerned for you. That's not being judgmental. That's having concern for somebody. And I think that's a fair thing. But I do think if it starts to interfere with your life, now you can't do certain things because of your addiction. You can't function at work, or there are things affecting your family. Those are signs as well.
So, what is your advice to someone who might find themselves, they're questioning, I think I might be addicted to this. Other people are noticing, I'm starting to notice. What can they do?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of resources out there, and there's certainly resources when it comes to addictions like alcohol, drugs, even food, sugar, things like that. You can get online and find, how do I combat sugar addiction, or how can I combat whatever. And I think it's fair to go talk to somebody if you have questions about what that might look like. But I do think that making sure that you have somebody in your life who's trusted, who you can go to and say, what are your thoughts about this? This is where I'm seeing problems. And there's a lot of great support groups out there on all of those things. And so getting involved and active in some of those things, I think, are really important. But I'm all about, finding, Google some of those resources near you. Where can I get help for alcohol addiction? Where can I get help for drug addiction? And there's even controversy surrounding that. Like, some people will say, alcoholism is not a disease. You can choose whether you drink or not. Same with any addiction, right? So you can choose whether you pick up a drug or not. You can choose whether you pick up a phone or not. And all of those, and whether we're talking about all those things like sex, porn, whatever, every addiction. And that's true. There is a moment in time where you make a choice to say, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this. But I think it's what drives you, that compulsion is part of the disease. Some people have said, instead of a disease, it's like you have an allergy to it. And so if you have an allergy to dairy, you should probably stay away from dairy. Same thing with any other addiction.
So, okay, what if staying away is not an option? Because it makes me think of, like, there's something that you can cut out, right? So, and
Food.
alcohol, you choose not to drink. But yeah, food addiction. I have to eat to live.
Yeah.
How can you manage something that you can't cut out?
Yeah, that is really hard. And I've actually dealt with both alcoholism, disordered eating, so all of the things. And I think I also was a 2-pack a day smoker. I drank 3 pots of coffee before 3 p.m. Moderation is not my middle name. I'm not a fan of moderation. But it is so much easier stopping something than it is cutting back on something or changing your lifestyle. And food is one of those things. You can cut out sugar, right? But food is one of those things that you can't cut out food. And so you have to learn to eat in a healthy way and to do things. And that is hard. And that's where I'm all about therapy. That's where I think therapy helps, because we can find a good therapist who specializes in each of those areas to help us navigate those waters. Because it was 10 times easier, I will tell you, now it wasn't easy. It was hard to quit drinking. It was very hard to quit smoking. But the disordered eating piece is really challenging because you cannot quit eating. Which, if you did, that's also disordered eating.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's the other end of the coin. Which is also
right. Right. Exactly.
Man, that is a challenge. I think of just myself, like soda. There have been multiple points in my life. I've got my Pepsi right here.
Yep.
Multiple points in my life that I've cut it out. But I have really struggled trying to do moderation with this. It's, for me, like, it's all or nothing. I have a hard time if it's in my house.
Yeah.
I go to it. And I've learned for me the only way I don't have is that if I don't buy it at all.
Mm,
And so I can totally see where you're saying something that you have to continue doing, like
right.
eating, that would be a lot harder. But it sounds like the common thread, what I've heard you say, is finding people, finding support.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's the appropriate support because, that just made me think of something when you said soda is a addiction. I have never uh, been I've never been a fan of soda, period. And so soda was never a problem for me. I would drink soda maybe to stop eating or something like that, but it was never like, okay, I've got to have my soda. But that doesn't mean that it's not a problem for other people. And I think it's kind of like we've talked about trauma. What is
Mm-hmm.
traumatic for me is not necessarily traumatic for you, but trauma is trauma is trauma. And so, what I might fall into addiction with may not be something you would at all. And I think we have to really honor those conversations with people so like that woman who said, this is something that's happening to me, I'm struggling with it. For people to respond with, you deserve it, don't worry about it, and is not helpful. And my guess is that the majority of people who said you deserve it have a problem themselves. I would, because when we have a problem, we want others around us who have the same problem.
This isn't an
Uh,
issue.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I used to justify my drinking all just by watching TV. Well, they're drinking wine on TV, so obviously it's not a problem. You can justify anything, right? But I think when somebody's reaching out for help, the last thing they need to hear is, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Quit being judgmental. Do what you want.
Like
And
if
if
I
I,
was fine, I wouldn't be reaching out.
exactly. And I think the whole, soda thing is a perfect example. It has never affected me. That does not mean that I shouldn't have compassion or understanding when it's somebody else. And I think
That's a
that's,
really good point.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that I would argue that all of us are probably addicted to something.
Uh-huh.
It's just what is the thing,
I agree. Yeah.
and
What
until you
can
see
you
it, it's
not
hard.
do without? Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I know there are tons of people in my life that, like using the soda example just because it's easy, tons of people in my life that would say that's not a problem at all. And maybe one
Hmm.
or two that would say, your body's screaming for water. You
Right.
need to drink water.
Right. Right.
Right. But the people who don't see it as a problem, like it's very easy to lean into that of like, oh, no one thinks it's a problem. It's probably not a problem. It's
Right.
fine.
Right.
And then I think that it would be easy if you see yourself as someone who's never gone through addiction, never struggled with that in any capacity,
Yeah.
to then be judgmental and harsh with others because
Right.
that's them, not me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I quit drinking and I was around a lot of alcoholics, and when I quit drinking, I don't mean it like that, but the people who were
The people in your life who
in
are
my
drinking.
life who were drinking, and frankly, still are, those people had a real problem with me quitting. And it's because it shines a mirror on them. When you have an addiction and you're hanging out with all the people who have the same addiction and you say, I'm going to quit, they hear a couple things like, crap, I'm losing my drinking buddy, or I'm losing my Pepsi buddy, or whatever.
Yeah.
But also, if they think they have a problem, then I must have a problem. And I think that's a hard thing to look at and say, okay, I don't want to look at their problem and think that they need to stop, because that just shines a mirror on me.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I see how relationships could get strained there
Oh,
because you
yeah.
don't want to be close to someone who's pointing out something about you that you don't like, even if they're not directly talking about you. That's uncomfortable.
It is. Well, and the other thing I would say is that, you know, AA says you have to change your playgrounds and playmates. So when you are in an addiction and your whole circle is filling that, you've got to find new people in your life or new. And so I think that's really hard too. When I got sober, I was very fortunate because we wound up physically moving out of the city into a new city. So I had been sober for 2 years and then we moved. And so when we moved into my new house, I had never, that house had never known me as a drinker. And so we had a dry house and it was great. And so, I think those are things that help, but you have to also be mindful that the whole world is surrounding any sort of addiction, right? Illicit drugs are easier to give up to some. I mean, they're not easier to kick, I would say, but it's easier to move away from that in a sense, depending on what the drugs are, because you can really get away from the people who are doing that. Alcohol is much harder because, and please don't hear me say it's easier to quit heroin than alcohol. I'm not saying that. The drugs are very hard to kick. But I think it's kind of the dynamic of food versus alcohol or food versus drugs. You go anywhere and there's alcohol as opposed to
Right.
illicit drugs, right?
It's advertised to you. You go into a restaurant, they're immediately asking, "Do you want some wine? Can I get you a
Yes.
drink?" It's very
Yes.
easy to say yes, and no one will bat
Yeah,
an eye.
exactly. Yeah. So I have a funny story for you. I'm not sure it's, well, I think it's funny. So I was in New York with my oldest, and we were in Little Italy, and we went to this fabulous cafe. Well, it was a dessert and coffee cafe, and you could either buy, it was lovely, and you could either buy the dessert and leave, and there was like a area, or you could sit and have a drink and some dessert. Well, we decided to sit, and obviously we were there for dessert. And I had, I think Noelle did have a drink of age. And I said to the waiter, I just would like whatever cheesecake. I don't know what it was. I would just like this. And he flipped the menu over because on the other side of the menu were all the cocktails. And he said, "No, you want one of these." And I said, "No, I don't. I'll just have dessert." That's where it should have stopped. But the
Oh, it didn't stay
guy,
there?
oh my gosh, he was like, "Nope,
Oh,
you want
goodness.
one of these." We went back and forth 3 times at least. And I said, "No, I don't want a drink. I would just like dessert and a decaf coffee or water, whatever." And he fought me on it. And
That's really
fine,
aggressive
it
upselling.
yeah, it really was. And finally, I said, and I was very boisterous. I did not keep quiet, but finally I said, "I would like you to stop asking me if I would like a drink. I'm a recovering alcoholic and I don't drink, so please stop asking me." And everyone turned around. And he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he walked away.
You
And
probably just
Noelle
made
looked,
it for the next person.
well, just wait. Noelle looked at me and she was like, "You warned him." So I was like, "Okay, yes, I did. I did." Well, he came back and he said, "I don't believe you, but I'm not
What?
going to ask you anymore." And I said,
Why does he want
"Come,
you to prove that?
Well, I did. I said, come here. And I opened up my wallet because I carry a chip with me
Mhm.
all the time. And I have usually the last, the year that I'm currently on in my wallet. And I said, come here. And I said, look at this. Do you know what this is? And he said, no. And I said, turn around, look closer. And he was like, oh. I said, that says I'm sober. I think it was 21 years at the time. It says I'm sober 21 years. I'm not lying. Don't ever do that to somebody again, ever. And he apologized profusely, actually said something like, this is like I'm in a movie. I don't know. It was just bizarre. But there was a woman behind me who walked up to me and she said, I just wanted to thank you. I have 2 years sobriety today, and we are here to celebrate with dessert. And what you did just helped me, stay sober for one more.
You tear up.
Yeah, it was a very cool experience.
That
But
is
it
cool.
just showed the amount of, I mean, talk about weird peer pressure. That's not even peer pressure. That's like some stranger pressure.
I mean,
Yeah, but
imagine if you were freshly sober 1 week, 30
yes,
days. I mean,
exactly. It was appalling. And so that's why I said don't ever do that to anybody ever again. And that's exactly it. It does not take much to justify and to fold. And I know with alcoholism, I think it's like 80% of people will relapse. And so it's not uncommon. And we have to really support people that are getting off of, drugs, alcohol. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage, a tremendous amount of support, and a tremendous amount of grit, really, and turning it over. It's a surrender, constant surrender. But I just think that's people need to be mindful of those things, whether it is food, whatever addiction, that we need to be honoring of people. If they say no, I know that's weird, but they mean no. It's consent.
goodness. Man, I feel like something that's probably not recognized enough by someone who hasn't had a loved one struggle
Mm,
or, have struggled themselves is it's not just I'm giving this thing up. It's I'm changing my entire life because this
yes.
was such a problem. And yeah, that
Yeah,
needs to be respected.
right. No, that's really true because it is a complete life change. And even when we're talking about eating healthy foods, same thing or whatever. Um, I have had to really be mindful of my food intake, and it's not so much what I eat, but how I eat and my relationship with food, and looking at food as good or bad, or things like that. I've had to change all of that mindset. But then at the same time, as I get older, there are things that I mean, back in the day, I used to, if I wanted to lose weight, I would stop eating for 2 days and lose, like, 10 pounds, like in my 20s. But that's not the case as you age. And so there are all those things that you have to think about. You're,
Okay. You were talking about some things that, you've changed to make it easier for you. And I think that one of the other things that people can tend to do that really do this recovering person a disservice is poke holes at that. Well, that's so weird that you're doing that. What do you mean you
mm,
don't want to go here or do this? Or pornography addiction is a good example. There's someone
mm-hmm,
I know that had struggled with an addiction to pornography. And so he has put guardrails in place for himself.
sure.
Phone is locked down, things are sent to a sponsor. If you look at those websites, it triggers someone else's phone
Yeah.
for that accountability piece. That's a great thing.
Yeah.
That's actively approaching the problem and trying to set up safeguards for yourself.
Yeah.
However, he has faced a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for?
Ridicule.
Mocking, ridicule. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because you're a grown man and you have to be babysat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's
Yeah.
not that. It's trying to be responsible. And I think
Right.
that sometimes, whether it's pornography addiction, alcoholism, whatever, that can happen too.
Yeah.
Of, oh, it's so embarrassing that you have to do that. Well, I don't think it's embarrassing. I think it's a sign of strength that you're
I
open to that.
I think that's a great point. I agree. And I think too, people who don't understand how, I think you're right. I think everybody is addicted in some way to something. And, if we were to be honest with ourselves or look at that, it's hard. And some of it, some of it may seem healthy, like I'm addicted to exercise, or I'm addicted to, I don't know, whatever. But, some of it could seem very harmless, but true addiction takes over your entire life. And so with pornography addiction, I know people who couldn't even function because of that addiction, or of course ruin families. And same thing with drugs and alcohol and food. I mean, I don't know if you
Yeah.
ever have seen, oh my gosh, I went on a kind of a binge, bad, no pun intended, of like my 600-pound life or whatever.
Yeah,
All
I think
this.
so.
Oh my gosh. It's a fascinating show, and I weirdly love it for some reason.
Like interesting and heartbreaking at the same time.
It is. And then sometimes very redemptive. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's like really encouraging to watch because these people change their entire lives. But these people, of course, are completely addicted to food. You know what is a common theme woven in that, especially in that show or
And
in
an
that? Yes, an enabler. There's always an enabler. And I think that's probably true with most addictions. There's somebody who does not want you, not even intentionally. It's not even like, I don't want you to get sober, or I don't want you to stop eating or get healthy, or I don't even think. But if you do, then you're going to leave me. Or if you do, it's all this other emotion, which is why learning codependency is also
That's
an
also.
addiction. Yeah. Right.
Well, and I think sometimes it comes from a place of like, I don't want to see you struggle. I don't want to
Hmm.
see you be sad. And even if you need to go through a period of being sad to be healthy, I don't want you to
Yeah.
do that.
Right. Right. Because it does suck getting free from
Well, and
that.
with a lot of those addictions too, there's physical symptoms, the withdrawal
Oh yeah.
you go through.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard to watch.
Yeah. It absolutely is. Because
Hard to
you are
live.
literally sick, right? I mean, it's a sickness. I remember when I quit smoking. Plus, like smoking, you're just mean, when you quit smoking. Here, have a cigarette. You are no fun to be around. But it is, yeah, any type of withdrawal is it's just hard on the body. You're probably not that pleasant to be around. And so I think that, but I think in those shows, it's often, the person is morbidly obese. And then the person who's enabling is also obese, just not morbidly obese. And so it's an interesting dynamic, which is, I think, the same with just about, with so many enablers, not all of them, but so many enablers. It's just interesting.
Well, and I wonder sometimes too if there's almost like this internal competitiveness of like, I struggle, but I need you to struggle more than me so I can feel okay about myself.
Ooh, yeah. No one would want to admit that, because
No.
that's that's a little selfish, but no, it's true. Yeah. Because you say, I'm not as bad as that person, right? I remember, so I used to sponsor people quite a bit in programs. I used to sponsor people, and one gal told me that, I don't know, she was telling me something and about her, and her story was like everybody else's story. I think all of us feel like, oh my gosh, either I'm the worst there is, or I'm not as bad as that, but we are alone. Like, we don't, nobody understands, nobody's been there. And so I said to her, "You are not unique." And she kind of was shocked. And I said, "You're like everybody else who's addicted to this, and it's no different. So don't consider yourself unique in this, because you're not." And I think sometimes that's a reality that needs to be slapped in our face as addicts, because we do feel very unique and no one will understand. And I have to deal with this by myself, and or I don't want to get help for this because, and it's you are so not alone, and there's so much support out there. But yeah, there's always something.
Yeah. I'm sure that was hard to hear, but important to hear.
Well, I don't know. She never got sober. So which is which
Yet.
is yet
Sober yet.
right, yeah, which is, it's sad. Some people just have a really hard time, and ugh, it's hard. And I'm just grateful. I have to say, so I got sober when I was like 32, and I am so grateful that I'm not one of those women my age, like out in the bars and just getting drunk. And I'm just so grateful. And I've had a weird, a, maybe addiction. I don't know. No, it's not addiction. It's a guilty pleasure, because I could stop at any time. No, I'm just kidding. I have a guilty pleasure of watching body cam arrests of drunk drivers.
Okay.
And it's fascinating to watch. Every single drunk driver on that thing is like, "I live right over there. I've only had one drink," or "I've had no drinks." Every single one. But it's just a good reminder, like, thank you, God, that I am sober, because I do not want to experience that every day of my life.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like,
Yeah.
hey, that's where I could have been. So glad that's not me right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to have, I think it would be really cool to hear just have a conversation of somebody's testimony, or something that somebody did give up as an addict or whatever it may be, and just hear their story, because I think it's important to hear other people's stories and how they recovered, and that redemption piece. I think those are the most important. That's how I always know, by the way, somebody is healthy to speak their story, whether it be a survivor of something, whether it be somebody who's addicted, because their story is not about the gory details. Their story is that redemption piece. And I think that's the bottom line and what it needs to be for people.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's what can really have the power to help.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, I think it's a good conversation, but I do think it's important to really be mindful, and it's self-awareness, right? What are the things in my life that are holding me back? Or what are the things in my life that are not serving me that I need to let go? And what are the things in my life that are literally keeping me from moving forward? And I think when we can look at that and identify those things, if there's nothing, awesome. But if there are things, going to get the help that you need, finding those resources in your area, talking to someone who has been there, or somebody who is licensed in that area. And I think there is no shame in asking for help. Shame on people who make somebody feel bad for asking for help, or telling them to continue in what they're asking for help for. But there is no shame, and there's so many people who can support. In fact, I will tell you, I'm very open about my alcoholism, and I just recently announced that I was 23 years sober at a event I was at. Thank you. And somebody approached me and said, that is so amazing. And I had several people tell me, yeah, I've experienced that. I've gone through that. You just don't know who is going through something like that or who needs help until you're just open sometimes. Or a server who outs you because you because you don't want a cocktail. Oh my
Moral of the
gosh.
story, don't do that.
That guy, he
I bet
should
you he can do it.
I can't even, I mean, it's the weirdest story because I can't imagine doing that to anybody. Like, what an idiot. But at the same time, it was cool because it made a difference in someone's life. And thank goodness it wasn't her he did that to.
True.
Seriously, come on.
Next level.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness.
It is. But now it's a good story. So
It is. Good story. And
yeah.
hopefully he looks back on that every time he's putting menus out. And
I
thinks,
hope he does. I hope he does. But even in my work, I will, I do a lot of networking. I go to a lot of networking things, and I cannot tell you how many people are like, let's meet over cocktails or just go have a glass of wine or whatever. And I'm fine with that. I would never embarrass somebody. But at the same time, that's how acceptable it is. And I think why it's such an epidemic.
I appreciate your openness with everything today. And I think this is
Yeah.
really important for someone to hear. And I don't know, kind of my takeaway from this that I think is going to stick in my mind is if someone really wants the best for you, then they're going to come alongside you and support you, even if they don't quite understand your problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I love talking about things like that because it's close to my heart and I know other people struggle with it, and just to give a place. And so I would offer, like, if that's something you are going through and you need someone to talk to, reach out because I am more than welcome. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with somebody. And you can reach us it is in our notes in the podcast or YouTube, but you can reach me at Stephanie at setmefreeproject.net and Rebecca at setmefreeproject.net. And we'd be happy to talk about addictions or human trafficking or anything. That's right. Yeah. So thank you so much. This was a good conversation, Rebecca. Thank you for suggesting it. And if there's something you want to hear, please let us know. We would love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time. Get some R&R. Bye.